everyone. Thank you for coming here. Thank you for taking time out to hear me speak about what I love a lot, street food. And when we were discussing what we should have as the topic for this talk, I suggested street food because all of us are missing the streets and the food of the streets right now. So this is a little ode to what we are missing. I am going to start screen sharing and then continue speaking so you can see what I'm speaking about. I hope I'm clear and audible. Wonderful. It's a little strange to be speaking to just about no one. One is used to an audience. I'm just making this full screen. Okay. So here we are. That is me, Shubhra. I'm History Wali on most social media. I am a filmmaker, a writer, and a researcher. Mostly in the reverse order because first we research, then we write our scripts, and then we go film. So that is what I do in a nutshell. And I have essentially shot across India. Over the last 10 years, I have documented the tangible and intangible culture and heritage of India. So Farooq also mentioned tangible and intangible heritage. Before we go any further, I just want to explain, I just want to make you understand what intangible and tangible heritage are and where within these does food fall, because as we go further, you'll understand that a lot of what we're talking about today is not recorded history, it's not written history. The sources come from various places, some of which you may not even imagine right now. So, but before we go into the classification of the sources, let's understand heritage. So essentially, tangible heritage is heritage which you can touch, and intangible heritage is heritage which you cannot touch. There are these UNESCO definitions here that I put up on the screen. Tangible cultural heritage refers to physical artifacts produced, maintained, and transmitted intergenerationally in a society. This includes artistic creations, built heritage such as buildings and monuments, and other physical or tangible products of human creativity. And what is all of this? Okay, so if you have to break it down, all of this that you see here on the screen, monuments, forts, temples, various places of worship, mosques, palaces, cities, ancient cities, the Indus Valley civilization, for example, what remains of it, markets, ancient universities like the Nalanda University in Bihar, the Nirma University up in Ladakh, art, sculpture, paintings, even textile, jewelry, carpets. All of these are things we can touch. All of these are physical things, so all of these are tangible. Now we move on to intangible. Intangible heritage indicates the practices, representations, expressions, knowledge, skills, as well as the instruments, objects, artifacts, and cultural spaces associated therewith, that communities, groups, and in some cases, individuals recognize as part of their cultural heritage. Now, this is a little complicated. I'm going to break it down in the next slide. What is intangible heritage? Oral traditions, performing arts, local knowledge, and traditional skills. And if you look at it from an India perspective, these are some of the examples of intangible heritage. Yoga, for example, is not tangible. You can't touch it. It's a knowledge system which has been passed down generation to generation. Dance, folk dance, theater, Vedic chanting, the Ram Leela, all of this, ritual theater, all of this is intangible heritage because you cannot physically touch it. Now, the thing is food tangible heritage or intangible heritage? That has always been a question we have grappled with. Food heritage can be defined as actually both a set of tangible and intangible elements of food cultures considered as a shared heritage or as a common good by a people. Why do we say food is both tangible heritage and intangible heritage? Because it's broken down. The tangible components are the food itself, what you eat, you can touch, artifacts, which are used to make food, culinary utensils, and intangible heritage, as far as food is concerned, involves cooking itself, practices, and knowledge, understanding what to eat in which season, understanding what is good for you. Ayurveda, for example, a knowledge system which has been passed out, which clearly tells you what you should be eating and when you should be eating it. It's not what, you know, we must realize. Okay, so when it comes to food, what we have realized is that you need both the tangible aspects and the intangible aspects to understand, study, and tell the story of food. It's not possible to understand cultural assets without considering the values and meanings invested in them. Values and meanings come from the intangible dimension, and it's not possible to understand the dynamics of an intangible heritage without the knowledge of the tangible culture. So, for example, let's just make it simple. When you talk about food, you know, you go back. We have, as of now, the furthest we know of what, you know, was cooked food in India is called the Farmana proto curry. So we have used, not we, archaeologists and scientists, Aruna Kashyap and Steve Weber, to be very precise, have used pots, okay, found in an Indus Valley site called Farmana, which is just about 70 kilometers away from Delhi. They have used these pots and they have done a sort of starch analysis on these pots to understand that what was cooked and left in that particular pot shard that they found was bengan, ginger, garlic, and haldi. So someone 4,500 years ago was having a curry or a sabzi which had bengan, ginger, garlic, and haldi. So that is how we use tangible heritage to understand food. And at the same time, the stories around food, what you hear from people, art, architecture, everything else that goes into food are the sources that help us study it. I'm just quickly taking you guys through these sources because everything I will be telling you today has come from one of these sources or the other. So what is it that we use to study food, and not just food, but also street food? Oops. There we go. We study food through paintings. These are miniature paintings. As you can see, this is one miniature painting which demonstrates production of a liquor of some sort. Again, paintings. This is a painting from the 1840s in Travancore, which shows you the kind of street food which was available in the markets then. If you can go close and, you know, try to understand what is being sold, you may just recognize some of the street food you find on the streets even now. Okay, this is religion. Religious practices also help us in understanding what we eat and why we eat it, why certain foods, certain ingredients are not used in temple cooking, why certain rituals are followed, why we fast. So religious practices is again another source that we use to study food. Of course, we have, so for the longest time, we did not codify our cuisine. We did not record our cuisine. But somewhere around the 11th and 12th centuries, we started to codify our cuisine. And these are, you know, some of the first books that we have written in India. This is the Lok Upkara, for the benefit of the people. It explains itself. And the Manasolasa, which was written by Someswara III. And both of these books were written in the what is now Karnataka, but they have information which helps us understand the food even around the country at that time, seeing what was available, how it was cooked, what was cooked, understanding agricultural practices. Okay, this is one of my favorite books. I had to look very far and hard to find it, and I finally own a copy. This is the Nimat-Nama of the Sultans of Mandu, which was written in the 15th century. And what you see over here is samosas being made. Now, there are 20 recipes of samosa in this particular book. It is the first book, the first text which has been written in India, which focuses entirely on food and recipes. It includes recipes in it. We also have chronicles. So what used to happen back in the day was history and what was happening around court history was all chronicled by, in the courts of the kings or the emperors. And their history, though it mostly included court workings or what was happening in the country, also had little bits and pieces and nuggets of, what the common man was doing, what was happening out on the streets. So you'll have a description, say, for what was happening inside the fort and what was happening on the streets in some of these texts. The Ain Akbari is not here, but that is again another text which has really helped us understand what was eaten and how it was eaten back in the day. That was in the time of the Mughal Badshah Akbar. Okay, another thing which we use to understand food as it was is wedding rituals and customs. This is one of my favorite things to show and discuss. So what these are essentially, if you see the bangles over there, these are churas and then the kaliras hanging from them. But as you can see, these kaliras have muri, murmura, and they have coconuts. In some cases, they also have makhanas. Now, these are kaliras from Kumaon and Garhwal and also Himachal. So what used to happen in the mountains was when a bride was, newly wed and she was leaving for her sasural, she would have these churas and kaliras on. And as she traveled a long, hard distance to her sasural, if she got hungry on the way, if there was a landslide or if they were stuck somewhere, the shy bride could take little bits of her kalira and eat, nibble on it instead of asking anyone in her sasural for something to eat because she might be too shy to do so. So this has been keeping brides from going hungry for a long time. I wonder why we do not still do it. Okay, again, this picture actually some of you may recognize. It's a photograph from Puri, from the Jagannath temple in Puri, which still cooks food as it was cooked at least 800 years ago. Some people say even 1,000 years ago, but we know that it has been being cooked the same way for the last 800 years. So this is what food must have looked like 800 years ago. It doesn't have a lot of the ingredients you're used to now. So, for example, there is no choti elaichi in this. There's only badi elaichi because at that time, choti elaichi did not exist in India. Only what was indigenous was used. There are no potatoes in this. Only kand, suran, jimmy kand is used. So yeah, so these are the various sources. Okay, then again, art is a big source, but one must also look at stuff like architecture, which gives you inlay work like this. In this, for example, this is from a Gurdwara in Patna actually, but over here you see the grapes, right? And if you look closely, you will see different colors of grapes. So it helps us to understand the kind and colors and varieties of grapes which were available back in the day. You see there's a red one. If you go a little bit, there's this purple grapes. On the side, there's slightly orange-yellow grapes. And over here, there are the green grapes below on the left next to the bird. So architecture, art, artifacts. Now, these are mother of pearl cups from the courts of the Mughal emperor. And all of this material culture explains to you what food practices must have been, what people ate and how they ate it. So that is that. Now that's the sorry I had to take you through all of that so that you would understand where all food stories come from. Now we go into our cow gully. This is a shot from Dal Mandi in Banaras, one of my favorite cities in the country. Very, very culturally rich. Why I have put this picture over here is that it holds the last sauce that I want to talk about, and that sauce is people. We get, as we travel around the country, shooting, cooking, finding food, eating food off the streets. Most of our stories come to us from the people who cook and sell this food, from the people who share this food with us, from the people of these cities and towns who love their street food and are proud of their culinary and cultural heritage. So people is the last but most important aspect, most important source. Okay, welcome to the Khaugali, stories from the streets of India. And of course, the first thing we shall be talking about is samosas. Now, I'm going to be also discussing as we go and how and why street food came to be. You know, what is the origin and what was the need for street food. But before we go into that, let's talk about the samosa. Huh. I am really, really missing the streets now. Looking at these beautiful samosas, I'm sure most of you have at some point in the last couple of months given a thought to these beautiful, deep fried, wonderful samosas. So amongst all Indian street food, samosa is it has probably the longest and most clear history. It's first mentioned in literature by the Persian historian Abul Fazl Behagi, writing in the 11th century, okay? Uh, and back then he called it the sambosang. It's not sambusa as you may have read, it was called the sambosang, okay? He describes it, and these are his words, as a dainty delicacy served as a snack in the great courts of the mighty Ghaznavid Empire. The fine pastry was filled with minced meats, nuts, and dried fruit, and then fried till the pastry was crisp. Now, it's important to understand that the first sambosangs or the first samosas were not did not have potatoes in them because potatoes were still 500 years, 600 years away from India. I think there's some disturbance. If someone has their audio on, could you please shut it? Okay, so coming back to the samosa. Okay, a few hundred years later, the Moroccan traveler Ibn Battuta describes being served a wafer-thin pastry packed with mince and peas at the lavish banquets of the court of Muhammad bin Tughlaq in 14th century New Delhi. This is most likely what he was served. If you look over here, this is the Lukhmi of Hyderabad, but it's perfectly descriptive of what Ibn Battuta described having eaten in the courts of Delhi. The samosa eventually evolved. I don't know if we can say evolved. It evolved into a humbler dish. You know, not maybe not crude, but certainly a humbler dish, which was then, you know, it went from the courts to the streets. So this is something which was first a court delicacy, and it slowly went to the streets where it became extremely popular. And once the Portuguese introduced potatoes to India, it became the filling of choice. I mean, you even have Bollywood songs which say, you know, Jab tak rahega samose mein aloo. So aloo is the favorite thing to go into the samosa. You have various versions of samosas. You have the Punjabi samosa. You have, you know, the Bori patti samosa. You have in Bengal, you have the shingara, which has cauliflower stuffing in it. So every part of India has its own version of the samosa, but one can, you know, just look at a samosa in any part of the country and know कि हाँ ये samosa है और ये samosa garam garam तला हुआ है and we must eat it right now. Guys, if I'm feeling you hungry, please do not curse me. It's a side effect of this particular talk. I hope you all have something to eat next to you, which you can do. I'm waiting for the talk to finish so I can also go and eat some. Okay, so like I said earlier, if you remember, I said that the Nemat Nama of the Sultans of Mandu also had 20 recipes for the samosa, and they had all kinds of fillings in it. There was one samosa which was only made of dry fruit, only like mawa. One had only, khoya or mawa, which had been cooked down and then stuffed into the samosa. So you don't really see too much of that now, but back in the 15th century, we had about 20 versions of samosas doing the rounds. Okay, right. Okay, now before we go any further, I would like you to understand the emergence of street food and what street food is. Street food isn't just samosa, kachori, vada pav. Street food is actually any food sold on the streets which is ready to eat or drink, sold by a hawker or vendor in any public space. It can also be like a mela, it can be a market, it doesn't just have to be the street. In Bombay, we outside our railway stations and sometimes inside our railway stations too, we have vendors selling various street food. In fact, even inside the trains themselves, as you're going back in the evenings, you'll have somebody coming with a tokri or a dabba of some sort of street food. There will be vada pavs, there'll be moongfali, there'll be, once I even encountered a bhel puri wala, which is a rare sighting on the Bombay train. But food that is sold in a public space to be consumed by the common man is street food. Um, According to this is actually a little it touched my heart, and so I had to put it here. According to a 2007 study from the Food and Agriculture Organization, 2.5 billion people eat street food every day. Right now that number is, I'm guessing, next to zero. I really hope we can go back sooner than later to our streets. What you see over here is a picture of biryani. This picture has been taken in Bhopal, where the biryani is called biryan. Don't you dare call it biryani. They will immediately know you're not a Bhopali. Uh, and, Bhopal has this culture of eating biryan for breakfast. So who's to say that biryan, which has been made, cooked, they start cooking it early in the morning and it's ready for your common laborer, your common man to come and eat at 10 in the morning before he goes to work. Who's to say that this is not street food? So when we say street food, it's not just the chaats and the kebabs, it's also this. It is essentially the food of the common man. Street food culture exists in all countries and societies, but perhaps most definitely none, actually, not even perhaps, none as wide and varied as the street food culture of India. It's a reflection of its many communities, castes, religions, and regions. So I tried to find a street food map. I found a food map, but I could not find the street food map. But within this map also, if you can see, there's a lot of mention of street food, which makes me wonder where one, crosses the border between food and street food. It's a question that's come to me a few times as I was preparing this talk. This next image that I got off the net, I think it belongs to Sterling Holidays, who will not be doing any holiday trips for a very long time. This image is of street food. Again, it's not entirely accurate, but like shakuti is not really street food in Goa, but it's more or less there. I mean, akki roti is not really street food in Karnataka, but yeah, your vada pav is there. You poha jalebi, aloo-tikki, litti chukka, momos, chaat, and my mouth is watering. Right. So much street food. Okay. So where did all this street food come from? When did street food start? In India, and our culture is actually a little peculiar. Our history is a little peculiar because between what is prehistory, which is unrecorded history, and history, which is recorded and written history, we have proto-history. Proto-history is that period when we knew, when people knew how to write, okay, when they knew how to write, but we can't decipher what they have written. I'm talking particularly of the Indus Valley civilization, Mehergarh to Indus Valley to the settlement in the Gangetic Plains. So that period is when urbanization happened, when our first cities were born. Now, this is very important. Urbanization is a very important thing to consider here because street food, and listen very carefully here, this is I think the most important takeaway. Street food is a product of urbanization. You do not find street food in rural communities. Street food belongs in the cities. Street food was born in the cities, and street food is of the cities. Huh. We can explain the street food and city if we take a little peek into economics, which is I'm sorry I'm taking you guys into the economics of this. I have actually studied economics and not history, so I must drag economics into everything. For the middle class, us, street food means an occasional snack. Perhaps you're going out, you go to Juhu Chowpatty, you eat something, you go to Chandni Chowk, or even when you're out shopping, at the weekly heart, you're having aloo-tikki, you're just picking up some jhalmuri, you're on the beach, you have some sundal, you're in Chennai. It's occasional, it's a snack. But for the lower socioeconomic classes in the city, it's sustenance. Street food vending culture is therefore the result of urbanizations having arisen from the need to feed poor factory workers of cities. Most street food vendors cater to laborers, daily wage earners, and people in the not so organized sectors who are too poor to afford to eat at dhabas. So the cuisine that they serve on the streets is usually vegetarian. And if it's not vegetarian, then the meat component is kept to a minimum. Of course, there's certain parts of cities where you will have a largely non-vegetarian population living. So over there, the street food is largely non-vegetarian. But that particular street food is not really meant for your daily workers, your daily laborers, your migrant workers. Street food, okay, is also low cost. It's not expensive, and it is packed with calories. It's like, कम पैसे में ज़्यादा calories, ज़्यादा dum. Because all your workers, they have jobs which are physically taxing, far more physically taxing than us. And they need the calories. They need to have food which is fried. Okay, this is one of the reasons why so much of street food is fried. Another reason why street food is fried is because back in the day when you didn't have means of refrigeration, fried food would last longer. If you're setting up a cart on the streets and you fry your kachoris in the morning, they would last to midday. They would not spoil. Other food which were cooked by other means are quicker to spoil. So in the markets of medieval India, for example, if you say lived in Shahjahanabad back in the day, you would have a lot more fried food than food which was kachcha, not pakka. So if we have these pakka, and food which is fried is pakka, food which is maybe boiled is kachcha food. Not raw, but if you talk in terms of cooking or cooking practices. Yeah. So packed with calories, low cost, and largely vegetarian. And this is because it's mostly for your daily migrant workers, daily laborers. Because the consumers of street food form a big chunk of the urban population, vending street food is a very lucrative business, or maybe was as of now, a low investment, quick turnover model. It is estimated that in India alone, there are more than 10 million street food vendors. And some studies say they constitute around 2% of the population of major metropolis. metropolises. Now, 10 million street vendors, and as of now, not even one of them is selling any street food. Major metropolises brings me to now actually talking about the stories behind the favorite street food of each of these, metros, and some also which are lesser known. I dragged in a few of my favorites. See, there is so much street food. It's been a very difficult decision as to what to keep and what not to keep. So I tried to put, some crowd pleasers in here and some which are my personal favorites. So let us begin. The first is, of course, Mumbai. Mumbai, because Mumbai is my hometown, and I haven't, for the last 2 months, I've been away from Mumbai. So, of course, I miss it very much. And I leave no chance to talk about it. So, Mumbai's Pav Bhaji. Now, if you guys, were reading the little tweets which were being put out, the flyers which were being put out before this talk, one of them said that a popular street food of Bombay is connected to the American Civil War. It is the Pav Bhaji. The Pav Bhaji is because the American Civil War was. Pav Bhaji literally is pav and vegetable. It's native to Mumbai, but the reasons for its invention, like I mentioned, are halfway across the world. Now, what happened was during the American Civil War, the North, the American North and the American South, the North blocked, put an embargo on cotton exports from the South to England. Okay, because there was this embargo, the mills in England, there was a lot of cotton which was required in England, and that need was not being fulfilled. So then England looked at its various, the various countries it was ruling over at that time to provide it what it needed. And Bombay happened to be a place where there were textile mills. This, I'm talking about the 1870s. What had happened just before was that the railway had come to Mumbai. There were a few trains running from the interiors of Maharashtra, which could carry the raw produce to Bombay, where they would be made into cotton in the mills. What these trains, what the railways also did is that they brought laborers and workers from the interiors to the city. So it provided workers, it provided labor, and it provided the raw material. So England asked the textile mills of Bombay to produce more cotton, to work overtime, and hence the mills worked overtime. Now, the mill workers would be working day and night, and they needed to be fed at all times. They needed to eat something at night. So the story goes that at night, when they went out looking for food, the local vendors would use up whatever bhajis which they found, in the evening markets, whatever leftovers they had from their days, selling from whatever they had cooked that day and sold, and they would mix it all up, mash potatoes into it, add in a little bit of masala, and serve it up with pav. So hence the Pav Bhaji. The Pav Bhaji happened in Mumbai because of the American Civil War. And why pav is also interesting. Of course, we had pav by then, but at the same time, these mill workers were being fed at night, and at night the ladies would not venture out of homes to go and make chapatis. Pav was easily accessible and available, so pav was used. Pav was served with bhaji instead of chapati bhaji. So that is the story of the Pav Bhaji of Mumbai. So I haven't included vada pav in this list, but I can't help but talk about it, because if there's one snack that's synonymous with Mumbai, it is the vada pav. Now, the credit for the vada pav actually goes to Ashok Vaidya, the Vaidya family. Mr. Ashok Vaidya has passed away, but his son still, I met him 3 years ago, and at that time he was running his little vada pav stall outside Dadar station on the west side. You know, you emerge from the station and you see his little vada pav cart. He doesn't have a shop. He still has like a little vada pav cart. And I remember back in the day when I met him, the BMC had, you know, basically made it illegal for vendors to have their carts out on the streets. So he was extremely depressed at that time. So Mr. Vaidya's father, Ashok Vaidya, is the man credited for the vada pav. What happened in the 60s and early 70s was that Bal Thackeray called for action amongst the youth of Maharashtra to come forward and do work which was productive and economically would take them forward. And at that time, Mr. Ashok Vaidya had opened up his little stall in which he would serve not vada pav, but just, you know, the patata vada. And one day a customer was extra hungry. So Mr. Vaidya just took a pav and put the batata vada in it and gave it to this man. And that was the first vada pav ever eaten. It's surprising. It's only about 50 years old. But yeah, this is the story of the vada pav. Where it has gone from then to now is amazing. So that's Mumbai. Next we have Purani Delhi ki chaat. So, chart is not just one thing. Chart is so many things. But if you look at the word chart, it basically means chartana, to lick. So chart is everything which makes you, you know, chato, which makes a chatora or a chatori out of you. The word chutney has also emerged from chart. And Chandni Chowk is where all this happens. So there's that old thing that goes, you know, Chandu ke chacha ne Chandu ki chachi ko Chandni Chowk mein chutney chakhai. So that in one sentence encapsulates the Purani Delhi ki chaat for me. Chaat is papri chaat, it's aloo-tikki, it's dahi vadas, it's so many things. But there's a legend which historians tell me is an urban legend, and one mustn't put too much to it. A lot of these stories, guys, are urban legends, so you just hear them and you feel happy about it. But when you actually go back and check with history, there's something else happening altogether. So there's an urban legend that goes that, you know, Purani Delhi, Shahjahanabad, which was established and set up by Shah Jahan, was right next to the Yamuna. Now, of course, the waters have receded a little, so it's a little further off from the Red Fort. But back then, it was right by the Yamuna. And of course, all the water which was being consumed and used was the water of the Yamuna, which was hard water. Everyone started falling sick, including the Badshah himself. So that was a cause of concern for the Hakims. So the Hakims then put their heads together and they figured that it was the hard water of the Yamuna which was making everyone sick. So what do you do to combat the effects of this hard water? A, you put a lot of masala in your food, you know, dhania, saunf. These are the masalas you'll find in chaat. They're all good digestive masalas. And two, you add dahi, because dahi again helps the good, you know, lactobacilli in the tummy. So it helps you digest stuff. It helps you when you have an upset tummy. And the third thing was you deep fry stuff. You know, you deep fry stuff, I mentioned it before, so it would not spoil fast. And the deep frying would, you know, do away with any effects the water, the hard water of the Yamuna may have had on the chemical properties of the food. So this is why the food of Purani Delhi, the food of Shahjahanabad, of Jama Masjid, Chandni Chowk now, is more spicy and it's deep fried. Go over there. This, I don't know if anyone is from Delhi, you will recognize these two pictures. This is a very famous chaat stall. And on the right hand side is the Dahi Bhalla of Natraj, a very famous shop there. Both of which I am suddenly missing very much. But yeah, so that is the story of the chaat of Purani Delhi. Going into each thing, I mean, there's so much in chaat. The, you know, aloo tikkis are called tikkis because tikkis mean small pieces. The vada of the dahi vada is actually is very, very old. Varas were mentioned even in Puranic literature. So, and there used to be a Vatikani Puranmasi, sorry, a Purnima on which only varas were made, different types of varas were made and eaten. And all of this is recorded in your Puranic literature. So that's the Purani, the Leaky Chart. Oh, Lucknow ke kebab. Guys, this is my undoing. Okay, so on the left you see Tunde Kebab of Lucknow. On the right you see some Sikh kebabs, which have also, this picture is also from Lucknow. Now, when I spoke to someone I consider my mentor, Salma Hussain, she's a food historian. She told me that kebabs are as old as man, as when man started cooking, because the first food we cooked would have been pieces of meat roasted on a spit fire, which is essentially your boti kebab without the masalas. So that's how old kebabs are. But the kebabs of Lucknow have various stories attached to them. I recently was, shooting something with a food historian called Rana Safi, and she told me that Shami kebabs are so called because somebody from Sham, which is Damascus, made the first Shami kebabs for the Nawab of Lucknow. Sikh kebabs are so called because they are on Sikhs. Galawati kebabs are so called because they are melt in the mouth. The story goes that the Nawab was old and he loved his kebabs, but they were too tough for him to eat with his teeth, which were about falling off. And back in the day, we didn't have too much dental care happening, so poor Nawab didn't have too many teeth left, but he still wanted to enjoy his kebabs. So his khansamas came up with a kebab which would melt in the mouth the minute you put it into the mouth. And they say that the secret of the melt in the mouthness of the kebabs is that the sherry arm, the sherry arm of Malihabad is used to tenderize the meat. Malihabad is right next to Lucknow, and the sherry mangoes from Malihabad are famous. If they should be coming, they are late mangoes, so they will be here in the next month or so. Kolkata Kathi roll. Now, the role of the Kolkata Kathi kebab is the kebab and the roll is also very interesting. There is a shop called Nizam's, which is in the New Market area of Kolkata. And back in the day, in the 1930s, to be very, very precise, there were a lot of blue collar workers in the area, blue collar and white collar workers who, white collar workers who would go into, there were offices around, and these men and very few women, these men wanted a quick on the go lunch. So the gentlemen at Nizam's just started putting kebabs into a Mughlai parotha and serving them, wrapping them up into a roll and serving, and these became a massive hit. So those were the first kathi rolls. The word kathi basically comes from stick, because these kebabs, they are, put on kathis, which are sticks. Earlier, they used to be metal seeks, but now very soon after, they started using sticks to skewer the kebabs, and hence the kathi kebab, and so the Kolkata Kathi roll. Kolkata, I can't not tell you this. Kolkata also has is where our beautiful Indo-Chinese was invented, if one may say so. Kolkata has been a center for Chinese migration from the late 1800s, mid 1800s, and there are these two localities in Kolkata, Tireti Bazar and Tangra. Now, Tireti Bazar is where the Chinese who came to Kolkata first settled, and then they moved to Tangra. There are leather factories. They would do a lot of leather work and trade. There was a lot of trade happening between China and Bengal. So these men and women who came and settled there, initially they would make Chinese food for themselves, but slowly this Chinese food started getting a touch of Indian masalas, and hence the Indo-Chinese was born. And slowly this Indo-Chinese started emerging from the homes and coming out into the streets. So the first Indo-Chinese stalls and shops would probably have been for Chinese workers to eat at, but then one adventurous Bengali would have gone and tried something and loved it. And so many more Bengalis would have gone and tried it and loved it. And so Indo-Chinese became a popular feature of the streets of first Kolkata, and slowly it spread to the rest of the country. Now, of course, what we call Chinese is not recognizable by the Chinese themselves. It has become so Indo. It's time to go down south and look at tiffin. Tiffin gets its name. Okay, tiffin is essentially what most of North India thinks South Indian food is, which is idli, vada, dosa. Tiffin is only actually tiffin. It's a midday meal. The British would call it tiffin, and hence the name stuck. So this is in no way is a proper meal down south. It's snacks. It's tiffin, and while we think that idli, sambar, vada, dosa is Madrasi, quote unquote, the dosa has actually come to us from Udupi in Karnataka, where it was first made by temple chefs of the Udupi Sri Krishna Math in the 5th century. Idlis are the oldest recorded incidence of idlis is in the book I showed you earlier, Manasulasa, where it is called idlige, and it is made only with dal. There's no rice in it, but everything else is idli. It is steamed the same way. And vadas, of course, go back a long way. I'm going to go quickly over the next few things, because I think I'm running out of time here. Guys, if I need to stop at any point, please do tell me. It's just me talking to a blank screen, so there is no interaction. But Bharat, if you feel we are out of time, please do tell me. Okay, now the lesser known things. The Mangalore buns is one. Now, the Mangalore buns, like the dosais of that we were talking about earlier, have also been, discovered, devised, invented in a temple kitchen. So what happened was, in Mangalore, in the city of Mangalore, one fine day there were too many bananas. All the devotees came to the temple and they chewed out bananas, and there were too many bananas. So the cook didn't know what to do with the bananas. What he essentially did was devise a new dish called the buns, which is bananas mixed with atta, fermented, and then deep fried. It is one of my favorite things to eat, and I had to put it in here just because it is so delicious, and also because I think Mangalore is very underrated when it comes to food and street food. And you must please, when you can, go to Mangalore and eat. You must go to places like Mangalore, Indore, Surat and eat, and not just stick to your Delhis and Bombays and Lucknows. Next up, okay, now this is not very known, but it's very unfair that we almost always not have anything from the Northeast, and this is one of my personal favorite things. This picture on the left of the kettles is, to me, the Northeast. It's actually Assam in a picture. This is in Guwahati. These are tekeli pithas. Now, pithas are basically rice cakes or rice crepes. They're made with rice which is soaked and then ground, almost very, very dry, mixed with jaggery. So you can eat, if you add a little water to it, you can make like a dosa-like crepe out of it. You can stuff jaggery into it and make various kind of pithas. You can even put til is often put into it. So various kind of pithas. But this tekeli pitha, the word tekeli is actually keteli, which comes from kettle. The common man, the vendors could not pronounce ketili, so it became tekeli. Now, why they are called tekeli pitas is because these pitas, if you see the shape, this idli-like shape, they're actually made in these dhakkans of these kettles. So while your cha is brewing in the kettle, this dhakkan would be filled with a mixture of rice flour, jaggery, and a little malmal ka kapda would be tied around it, and it would just be placed on top, and it would steam while your chai is being made. It's a beautiful early morning snack which you find on the streets of Guwahati and in a lot of places in Assam, and it is truly delightful. One of my favorite street food examples from around the country. I can't not, you know, mention Surat. There is a saying that goes, Surat nu jaman, Kashi nu maran, which says if you want to eat, you go to Surat, and after you've eaten in Surat, you go to Kashi to die. You must, if you haven't been to Surat, go to Surat to eat. This is the Surti Locha. Now we all know of the dhoklas, the fafras, the khamans. Gujarat actually uses a lot of besan, and it has a lot of farsan. Now okay, let's just talk about farsan. The food of Gujarat is certain parts of Gujarat, not coastal Gujarat, not places like Chikli. Certain parts of Gujarat are largely vegetarian, and hence they have a lot of little snack like things on their thali to supplement the food that they're eating. And why they use so much besan is that besan is protein. So a vegetarian diet, a diet which is largely based on plant proteins, need that extra bit of protein to make it nutritious. Hence, you see the use of a lot of gram flour, a lot of besan in Gujarat. The locho is a special dish. It is called a locho because it is a locho. Locho here means locha. It's a dish which was found accidentally when a particular vendor was trying to make dhokla, and he got too many customers too soon, and he took the dhokla out before he should have from the steamer, and it wasn't quite cooked. It was just half cooked, a little gloopy, and he just took it, added masalas, added a bit of pyaz, dhania, and chutney to it, and put a little bit of tail on top, and he served it up, and the customers apparently loved it, and hence the locho came to be. Of course. Okay, now we have moved from regional examples to stuff which you find all over India. There are just two of these, so we'll be done soon. There is the Bhel Puri, which has various versions, churmura, jhalmuri, whichever part of the country you're in, laiya, you call it by that name. There's a very cute story about the Bhel Puri, which is that once a British cook was sent out by his commander at the barracks. A British cook who used to serve at the army barracks was sent out by his commander to find the perfect Bhel Puri recipe. So he went from street vendor to street vendor to street vendor. He tried to find as many recipes as he could, and each one would tell him a recipe which was a little different. And by the end of it, this man was so confused. He was so confused that he went back and he told his commander that he hadn't been able to find a recipe for the Bhel Puri. And the commander got really angry and shot him and killed him. This, of course, is a legend. There's no truth to it. There's another version of it which goes that the man was so frustrated that he committed suicide. But whatever it is, it makes for great storytelling. So basically, nobody knows how the Bhel Puri of the streets of Bombay came to be. The Jhalpuri, though, is credited to Bihari migrants who set up stalls in Kolkata around the time of the Second World War. Lots of soldiers were filtering into the city, and a lot of Bihari migrants had come in at that time and set up shop to cater to the sudden burst in population. And these migrants are supposed to have brought moody, uh, 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 have brought jhal moody, not moody with them, you know, this masala moody. Moody itself is very intrinsically connected to Bengal, because, as you may know, Bengal has been through a number of famines due to, you know, various policies, bad policies and bad governance by the British. And at the time of these famines, was in a lot of homes, people didn't have enough rice, so they would make muri, because the quantity would become thoda zyada. It would look voluminous, so you know there would be a sense of having eaten a fuller meal than just a little bit of rice. So there's a very cogent connection there with Bengal and the Bengal province, which is Odisha and parts of Bihar. So that is the Muri story. And okay, last but not the least, Pani Puri, Golgappa, Batashe, Puchka. I put all names there because I didn't want to get shot by anyone listening to this. Every place thinks their version is the best, and I'm not going to comment on which version I think is the best, but I do have a cute little story. Now, nothing in India is untouched by our epics and our myths. So there is a cute little story, again, completely unfounded, but a story nevertheless, which tells us that the Pani Puri or the Golgappa was invented by Draupadi. So when she was a young bride, Draupadi's mother-in-law called her and said, take this, one aloo, a little bit of atta, and that's it, a little bit of masala. So she gave Draupadi this, which was enough to feed one husband, and asked her to feed all five and make sure they were content and satisfied and full. Hence, Draupadi went back and she made little puris, she made a little aloo ki sabzi, and she brought water into the mix so that it would fill her husband's up. And she invented the pani puri or the golgappa, and hence she showed herself as a wise and good wife who could satisfy all five husbands in the resources it would take to satisfy just one. So okay, so that is me. I think we are running out of time, so I shall stop here and we shall open up for questions.
Okay, thank you so much, Shubhra. You've taken us through a veritable journey. You took us through the Indus Valley civilization. You took us through the Mughal paintings, 20 recipes for samosas, temple food, wedding food. It was all there. I have been going through the questions. Can I start off with them?
Right.
Ankur wants to know why the masalas in street food in Pav Bhaji are different from what we eat at home. And what is that special ingredient that makes Bombay Pav Bhaji different?
Okay, I think what makes Bombay Pav Bhaji different is a street vendor secret, so you must go ask them. But if I were to venture a guess, it would be that they add a little bit of chaat masala into their bhaji, which you don't find us really doing at home. So that chaat masala gives you that chatpata-ness that you get off the streets. And of course, it's all that maska that they put into it. You know, at home, moms are watching their weights and the health of their family. So not that much maska or butter, Amul butter, to be very precise. Nobody uses anything else, goes into the pav bhaji. But, you know, every home has their own different... it's okay, so let me just say this. Every home in India makes their own twist, gives their own twist to whatever it is they're making. Not just the pav bhaji, but any sabzi you make. There is no one authentic pav bhaji recipe. And like I said with the bhel, there is no one authentic bhel recipe. So that illustrates the non homogeneity of recipes in India. Everyone has their own. So what is on the streets, every vendor's pav bhaji will taste a little different from each other also, and not just from what you eat at home.
So Ankur, here's your answer. It's in the chaat masala. Ashwin recognized one of the visuals when you were talking about the chart. He recognized one of the visuals as something from Padam chart.
Yes, that is true. Yes.
I had a question also about street food from the south. Why are Tuticorin macaroons not popular anywhere outside Tuticorin? You don't see it in the rest of Tamil Nadu. You don't see it in the rest of India, for that matter.
Amazing, like it's I know exactly what you're talking about, but this is the case with a lot of street food across the country. There are various things, like for example, the pitas are not something you would find anywhere outside of the northeast or Assam actually. um, you have so many, like in Indore, like Indore is street food heaven. Over there you have the bhutte ki kheers, which is so popular in Indore, but I've never found anyone in Bombay or Delhi or even Bhopal. I mean, I'm in Bhopal right now and there's no one in Bhopal who makes bhutte ki kheers.
And of
So
course, the kachoris.
yes, and the
Okay.
kopra patties. So there's every place has their own little speciality which you don't find elsewhere.
So going back to Mangalore buns, Ankur wanted to know where he can find Mangalore buns in Bombay.
Come home. I'm not very sure where you'll find Mangalore buns in Bombay, but they're very easy to make at home. And we've actually, very recently, so I do these Instagram lives every evening, and where we cook recipes from different part of the country. And somebody from Mangalore showed us all how to make the Mangalore buns. And she said that instead of making banana bread, going nuts over banana bread, let's make it a desi banana, right? And she made Bangalore buns, and her recipe has actually taken over Instagram. So everyone is busy making Bangalore buns on Instagram these days.
Great. Bharat had a question which is in two parts. What is the difference between Bombay chaat and North Indian chaat?
I think somewhere it is that Yamuna ka pani. I'm just kidding. I what I feel is that the chart of North India is more it's the produce which is different. The dahi over there is different. If for example if you go to if you I have seen this in say Uttar Pradesh. The produce of Uttar Pradesh to me tastes better than the produce of any other part of the country. I don't know. I think it's something to do with the Gangetic Basin, and the everything you eat over there is more flavorful. Similarly, in Delhi, what I feel is other than the produce and the dairy, the chaat in Delhi is more masaledar. It is more deep fried. It is exactly how what I explained of the chart, of how chart came to be the way it is in Old Delhi. It has a little more. In Bombay, I think what we do is we don't. We feel it's a little too excessive. We don't add necessarily that much masala or deep fry stuff in ghee, or and probably also the weather is what makes a difference. So if you see the street food of Bombay is a little less spicy than the street food of Delhi, and I think that is where the difference in taste comes about. This, I think, I'm just venturing a guess over here, but that is what I can tell of it.
You also want to know what's the difference between Pani Puri, Golgappa, and Puchka. I think you've answered that, saying that they're basically the same and you didn't want to be shot by anybody from any part of the country.
Well, it's a little different in every place, So it's whether you're using alus or you're using ragra, what mix of alus and ragra you're using. In some places you don't use ragra at all. You have only aloo ki sabzi. Some people put sprouts in it. So it's different in different parts of the country, but the basic idea is the same.
Okay. Shambhavi wanted to know which are your top 3 places in Bombay for street food.
In Bombay. So, okay, I will tell you. The first 3 places I will go to once this is done, I think should be the answer, is I will go to CST and I'll hop right across and I will go to Aram Vada Pav and Cannon Pav Bhaji and that entire street. And from there, I will just, once I'm done eating there, I will go to the Khau Gali at Churchgate, because some of my favorite Bombay food is found there, so that is one. Second is Juhu chapati. I live in the suburbs, so I'm more partial to Juhu chapati than the main chapati, Girgaon chapati. So I would definitely go to Juhu chapati because Pav Bhaji doesn't taste quite the same anywhere else. You need that little hawa, the breeze of the sea on your face as you're eating.
Maybe a few grains of sand too.
Maybe a few grains too. Absolutely. And there's the third place would likely. I think every place in Bombay does a fabulous faluda, but I would definitely go maybe to Mahim. There's a small, tiny Khaugali in Mahim, and they do some brilliant faludas over there. And yeah, so I think I'll go there for faluda. That would be the third place I'll go to.
Swapnil wants to know the connection between clams, which is a shikanja, and the drink shikanji. I think he's referring to the teaser which we put out.
Yes, so it's basically in the name Swapnil. And what we often use, another source that we use to study the history or the journey of food which has come to us, or food as it is now, is the name. So when you have a name, you try to see which root word it has come from. And shikanji is essentially called shikanji because your lemons had to be put into a clamp and tortured to get the juice out of them. So shikanj mein dal ke unse ras nikalte the, and hence shikanji happened.
Okay. Swapnil, that explains the mystery of the teaser. Moving on, Sneha wanted to know how do mythological stories get associated with food without any substantial evidence for it?
I don't know how it happens, but okay, there are various ways. Okay, so a mother is trying to feed a child and she's telling stories to make the food more interesting. That is one way. A vendor is trying to sell his wares and he's trying to reach out to an audience saying, with stories which are fantabulous and fascinating. So he will say कि सबसे पहले इसने बनाया था, आप आके देखिए यहाँ से आया है. So I think stories get associated with food, especially street food, essentially to sell street food better.
Okay. One of the things which you mentioned that street food is basically urban food and you don't find a lot of it in rural areas. Is this because of unavailability of ingredients or what? This is Juhi Kulkarni's question.
Juhi, the reason why you don't see as much street food in rural areas is because people don't eat as much street food there. They eat more at home. If you're in a village, you have produce growing around you. There is very little need or means for you to go out anywhere. There are very few places you can go out to eat street food in the first place. So street food essentially is food which is out on which is sold on the streets for at cheap rates for people who need that sustenance. When you're living in the villages, you don't have shops, you don't have too many shops, you don't have the massive markets. You have your hearts. At the heart, somebody may come sell a little aloo-tikki, but other than that, there's no real street food happening. There are no stalls of pani puri walas. There's no dosa or idli which is being made at your weekly tribal farmers market. You will probably pick up some bear and eat that. So it's to do with that. Food in villages is definitely more nutritious and it's more cooked at home. It's not so much made outside and sold because nobody needs to buy food. You can eat it at home. I'll just add to that to make it clearer. A lot of the migrants who come to the cities come without families and they live in these little one-room shacks with many other migrants, many other workers. They don't have a space in which to cook mostly. They don't have too much. They don't have a kitchen that's set up. They don't have masalas, So for them, it's just easier to just buy something cheap off the streets and eat it. Hence, street food and the migrants.
Julie also wanted to know which kind of foods were mentioned in the Puranas.
So, okay, so you have a lot of mention, like, the Vedas, for example, the Rig Veda has an ode to ghee, for example. A lot of food which was part of various religious rituals, part of various yagnas is what is mentioned. So, what is it that is sacrificed to the gods? What is it that is used in various pujas? All of that food is mentioned, as well as the most basic cereals which are grown. There is a mention of barley, there is a mention of rice, there is a mention of fruits, there is a mention of panakam, which is fruit juices. So these are the kind of things you'll find mentioned in the Vedas and Puranic literature.
I believe you'd refer to a lot of it in the seminar in January in Bombay, when you were
Yes,
talking about food history, and you'd mentioned the book too.
yes, yes.
Speaking of books, Sneha wants to know, is there a recommendation? What is your recommendation to understand food history better to read?
There is okay, so there is one book which I carry around with me wherever I go. There are actually two books. One is a historical. I have it right here. Actually, it's. I'll show it to you if you can see it. Maybe this is older for you. This is a historical dictionary of Indian food by K.T. Achaya. Uh, it's got everything. It's classified. It's a dictionary of food. So you have your A for apple, and you have your B for bananas, and you have your C for coconuts, and it tells you the history of these ingredients of this food. But what you must remember with Mr. Achaya is that not everything is accurate. Use it as a starting point to do your research. Use it as a starting point to understand food history, but always verify your sources. Also, it's a slightly older book, so a lot more has been discovered since then. New discoveries are being made every day, so this doesn't have everything there is that we know.
Sorry.
The second book I'd recommend is Feasts and Fasts by Colleen Taylor Sane.
Yes.
It's a lovely book which you must have in your library, and you don't have to read it from start to finish, but you can always look up what you want to know about in it. She documents not just the histories, but also the various stories around food, myths, legends, customs, very, very beautifully.
She was your co-speaker at the January seminar.
Yes, she was.
Speaking of books, I think we should inform our viewers that your book is going to come out in 2020.
Hopefully, as soon as I get done writing it.
Okay, she's going to cover the culinary history of India in 100 recipes, right?
Yes.
The last question is on a slightly personal note.
Okay.
Sneha, you are half Punjabi, half Bengali, live in Mumbai. Do you have internal fights over Golgappa, Puchka, and Pani Puri?
Well, Sneha, actually we don't because we actually don't have fights about food because we get to eat the food of everywhere. I think that's the short answer. I am half Punjabi, half Bengali. I'm married to a Tambram, and I have lived in Maharashtra for the last 20 years. I was born in Gujarat, so every place is to me mine, and I can't choose.
So you are indeed the right person to write about national and regional cuisine too.
Inshallah.
We don't have any more questions. So in case anyone has one last comment they'd like to make, they can unmute and speak for a minute.
There's a lot of food which I had to leave out today. I'm sorry. But what's the different, and what is SK pakoras? I'm not sure. Is that banana pakoras? I don't know what SK pakoras is. I'm so sorry. But pakoras and buns, okay, first of all, your ripe banana is mashed into the batter of, oh, okay. So I think the goli bhaji also doesn't have bananas, and that's the key difference. Because the mango bun has kela in it, sweet bananas mashed into it, and then is left to ferment. And goli bhaji does not, as far as I am aware, have bananas in it. I think that could be the difference. Please correct me if I'm wrong.